Season 4 has an absolute broken Necro build without minions. Behind me, you can see Corpse Explosion taking for 10, 12, 14, and more millions per second, being stacked on top of each other and overlayering itself. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the lowest damage it will actually deal, because this is only my Season 3 Necromancer, and he's missing a few important key things that Season 4 will bring to the table. Let me explain why Shadow Necro will be so incredibly not okay for all your opponents, and especially melting Tormented bosses, Uber bosses, and the Pit like crazy. First, let me explain how it works and why does it do so much damage, and then what Season 4 does even better than Season 3. We are essentially using our Blight with the 20% damage multiplier, together with a super boosted Corpse Explosion on as many Corpse Explosion ranks as possible, and here we have 15 out of 5. That can be higher in Season 4 because my chest piece 5 ranks in Corpse Explosion without a greater affix. This gets turned into Shadow, then the maximum damage multiplier with Fueled by Death, which is on 5 ranks already. And yes, a Black River Scythe that currently has 4 ranks to all Corpse Skills and 2 to Fueled by Death. That one can get greater affixed and masterworked as well. So if you're really lucky with your 25% rolls, goes above and beyond. And look at the intelligence roll, which is only 66. Intelligence will play a very key role in this build. Furthermore, the Decrepify for the cooldown reduction so we can keep spamming. Corpse Tendrils does an incredible amount of damage as well. And interestingly enough, we have Crippling Darkness, which does have a lucky hit chance proc for damage and not only stun at this point, adding another layer of damage. And yes, there is Crippling Darkness Temperings to put even more ranks on this. And every rank adds another 20% multiplier, making this not too bad to think about. Lastly, down here, we currently have attack speed instead of critical strike chance. That will come later. Memento Mori for the sacrifices. That works, but doesn't show in the tooltip. And then the Shadow Blight key passive, which does get quite boosted with all the shadow damage over time we're doing. And my gear isn't even optimized because this is only 161%. I think with better gear, I could go up to 240 to 50%, considering that the shadow damage over time affixes roll way higher in Season 4. Our intelligence is currently at 1092, and that is very important. And it gets so high because we have a 10.5% intelligence boost on the amulet. Yes, which helps tremendously if you already have a huge amount of int. Now, our main aspect is the 180% damage boost as the Shadow Blight key passive gets active, which then hires all our damage. Every damage tick over second gets this 180% plus. What we're missing right now is another nasty 50% multiplier. This is out of the Codex, the lowest roll. You deal 40x increased shadow damage to enemies afflicted by both Decrepify and Iron Maiden. Well, guess what? In Season 4, this is only afflicted by one of your curses. So 50% X damage multiplier for using your Amplify. Ta-da! And now the whole thing that ties this together and then truly escalates the damage is in your Paragon board, the absolute standard basic ass Wither node. Your shadow damage over time effects have a 5% chance to deal 50% bonus damage. It doesn't sound like a lot, but since this does increase for every 60 int you have, and we have 1100 int, we have a current chance of 23% for 122x bonus damage. The very important thing to look at here is your shadow damage over time effects, which means that if you do 10 million damage, there's a 23% chance that that tick can go 122x more. And that's only 23% on 1000 intelligence. What if I tell you that 2000 intelligence is easily possible with endgame gear in Season 4? This bonus that's already bonusing right now, double. Just melting everyone. If you're looking at my gear, I have 50 int on the gloves. It could be at least 100 to 150 int. Same goes for the helmet. It's 70, but it could be 100 to 150. My chest doesn't even have int. My boots are currently at 80, which is actually respectable. Could be higher. The Black River as well. If we put out the Xfals Corroded Signet, which has 30 all stats, that again could be 100 int easily plus. And we don't actually need the Littlest Wall for this build, so we're missing on all these pages intelligence stats that will then be greater affixed, masterworked, all this kind of stuff. By the way, yes, we're already at the armor cap of 9,232 because you'll never need more. There's a link in the description below about this topic if you've missed out on it. Now, in order to really reach that damage, we're currently playing the Darkness Glyph maximum boosted for more shadow damage, that you're really doing the maximum amount of shadow damage. This gets followed up by the Amplify Glyph for the 10% damage multiplier, that when they're cursed, even more damage. With the Scorch Glyph for more shadow damage over time, because if our Corpse Explosion is boosted as high as possible, if it's doing as much damage as possible, then the bonus can be as high as possible as well. That's another 10% damage multiplier, plus, well, the shadow damage over time boosts your Shadow Blight key passive. Followed up by more corpse skill damage, which is great. Push the exclamation as far as you can, do more corpse explosion damage. Then with the exploit glyph for more damage versus vulnerable, and then lastly followed up by the imbiber glyph for more damage while healthy. We'll probably replace this for you and your minions, deal 10% increased non-physical damage multiplier to do even more damage potentially. But you haven't even seen half of it because the temperings for necromancers are going off the charts. Since on your gloves, you could straight up go for corpse explosion. And this corpse explosion damage, we're talking about 150% plus another 150%. Oh, guess what? That's corpse explosion here, correct? It can go on the amulet as well. So we'll have their corpse explosion too, 150% plus, 150% plus. Well, if we're playing then an offhand, who would have guessed? Oh yes, corpse explosion damage can be put on there too. No way. That would be crazy if we get 150, 150, and another 150% plus to essentially go absolutely crazy. Now, we did talk about Crippling Darkness, which does damage, right? And every bonus rank does another 20% bonus damage. Well, that can end up on your chest if you wish to. Crippling Darkness. That could end up on your pants. Crippling Darkness. And if you don't have anything on your helmet, I do believe that could also end up on your helmet. Just giving you 4 ranks in Crippling Darkness for, oh, even more free damage that's happening anyways. Alternative to boosting Corpse Explosion, you could also just boost your shadow damage over time in general. Because shadow damage over time does also influence your blight, because your blight effects that do similar damage to the Corpse Explosion, yes, they can trigger the Wither node as well. And every point of damage over time boosts your Shadow Blight key passive, which is currently at 10,000 damage with a 161% increased bonus. That being said, the Shadow Blight key passive has the lowest scaling, so I'd rather focus on the Corpse Explosion and the Blight to get more ranks into that. Lastly, to round the whole thing up, you could think about Xfals Corroded Signet. But not only Xfals Corroded Signet, because here it gets interesting. Your damage over time effects have up to a 50% chance to erupt, dealing damage to enemies nearby, right? The problem with this one is you would have to stack a little bit into crit, because that eruption would get higher through crits, but we're mainly focusing on just pushing our shadow damage and shadow damage over time that we then get the most out of our intelligence bonus. So we're actually not pushing the crit, what makes Xfals possible, but not the main choice, because all our damage happens without lucky hit. That being said, there is another tempering called the Elemental Surge that gives you a 40% chance to deal 18,000 to 23,000 shadow damage, and the 40% chance is quite high because it's all your damage, not only your shadow damage over time. That one get nerfed a bit, but it should still be a viable option to put on your gear. But again, same problem as with the Xfals, it's not critical strike what we're doing, it's just boosting our damage overall. Which, hey, still boosts the damage of these explosions, but not as much as if you would be focusing solely on critical strike. But who cares about that if every single tick of our corpse explosions does millions of damage? And it's so easy to pull off. I mean, we just throw in everything, curse, activate our storm if we want, go in to become unstoppable for a bit more damage multipliers, and then our damage just goes crazy. And we're just getting up to the million, 10 million, 10 million, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. It's simply beautiful to see how much stupendous damage you can do over time, especially as then your 100% bonus gets activated and you're just completely going off the charts. And yes, that works against bosses very well. And one reason for that is that Hood Flesh finally is working correctly, and you can get even more than 6 ranks on it with the correct tempering and master working, push it up to 8 ranks, and that, well, every bonus rank is another 4% more, right? And 4% more is actually significant since it gets doubled versus bosses. So if we would get 2 ranks more on this, we go up to 32, which makes it a 64% chance to get a corpse against bosses. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I could give you a nasty, fun outlook on a potential crazy Necromancer. There is a build link in the description below that's going to shine light on the whole build, but we'll obviously do it in Season 4. And now if you're rather interested in our good old friend, the Summoner, Shadow Summoner or Bone Summoner, there's 2 builds for you to enjoy. Thank you for watching. Love to have you here.